I recognize the member for Oshawa.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and I'm glad to be able to take my place in this House and address Bill 146, which is called the Building a Stronger Ontario Together Act. And one would hope that, that with a title like that there was going to be the kind of weight behind those words that folks in Ontario are so desperate for, that they are really in a state right now of such need. Whether we're talking about the increased food bank use, whether we're talking about wait times still in our hospitals and in our healthcare system, whether we're talking about folks who cannot find housing that they can afford, that is safe, that is appropriate. There are a lot of people in crisis right now, and Speaker, I am hoping to be wrong, but it feels like it's getting worse. And I feel like there's a lot of harm looming as we're seeing prices continue to go up and people continuing to struggle. And so I would say it is incumbent upon governments, specifically this one, because they are the government I have the distinct pleasure of sitting across from. I would say that it is incumbent upon them to make headway, to make a difference, to make things better. And so, coming from that place, I want to share a lot of the voices from, or many of the voices from my community with the members here tonight. There is such challenge out in our community, and I think that puts it mildly. But adding insult to the injury that people are feeling is the fact that they cannot trust this government, that we have a government right now mired in a criminal investigation, that the RCMP is not just banging on the door, is interviewing more and more folks. And I hear the sounds coming from the backbenches that maybe they're tired of hearing this one. Well, so are the folks in Ontario. They don't want... It's bad enough that people, I think have had it up to here with sort of governments or politicians in general. But when their worst fears are borne out, and that they can see proof of that in what they read and what they hear and what they're realizing, like an RCMP investigation, another Auditor General probe into Ontario Place. It never ends with this government. So we have all of these challenges in the province, and then they turn their eyes to Queen's Park and they hear a lot of stuff and nonsense that does not resonate with them and their families. They hear a lot of promises that do not bear out in terms of the actual felt reality. Speaker, there are things that we would hope to see in the fall economic update, in kind of that chance for the government to show here's how things are going economically, here's how things are going in our communities. But we don't see a government that is getting back into the business of building homes. And this government really ought to take a long, hard look in the mirror and get it right in their head that they have a responsibility to provide services to help folks find housing. And if that means to get back in the business of building it, then by all means, you would have our support. People need to be able to afford where they live in communities that they want to live and work in. When we hear from the business community, and I know that they hear it too, that businesses cannot employ people in their own communities, or that people can't find housing where they want to work, that's a real challenge for folks. We need to raise wages. We need to end price gouging, tackle real estate speculation that is driving up costs. We would like to see the government invest in stronger public health care that is there when they need it to reduce wait times and make sure that people have a family doctor. We all, I hope, recently met with the doctors, the family doctors who came to the table with a lot of really basic suggestions, like big picture thinking, but also just here's what we can start tomorrow. Here's how we can try to keep more students on the path to becoming family doctors. But again, we also have to focus on cleaning up the challenges the government keeps laying at our feet, we the province. And this bill is an opportunity I'd say, unfortunately, though, it does miss the moment. Speaker, I did a survey. I put it out to the community, and I asked folks, what message can I share from them or from their family to the Premier? And so they gave me their concerns in their own words, and I want to read some of those. So Dara Berry wrote, when I asked what the concerns were, Dara wrote, Greenbelt land swap and Highway 413, Ontario Place plan, privatization of healthcare, underfunding of healthcare and education, private long-term care and lack of accountability, not spending millions, or is it billions, of the budget, essentially starving public services so that they fail, all in the name of making the budget books look good, even though major damage to society is the end result, removal of rent control and other renter protections, and we see what has been done to make the housing shortage even worse, not listening to government staff, planning experts on how best to address the housing crisis and responsible development of land, lack of commitment to the hard choices needed to address the climate emergency, and continuing to mislead residents regarding efforts like the carbon tax, too much policy based on the wants and desires of the elite. And Dara goes on to say, we have major concerns about all of the above. We are not naive. He is not for the people, not the regular people, and he does not treat us like friends, so stop referring to us that way. We acknowledge when this government gets things right, like cooperating with other levels of government during COVID, but we will never support a party that puts the short-term needs and wants of themselves and their cronies first, and worse, causing major damage to our public institutions and the long-term sustainability and strength of them, our economy and our environment. They need to immediately listen to the experts and appropriately fund education, health care, long-term care, and the like, and hold private landlords and corporations accountable for their roles in contributing to many of our current crises. That's someone who took the time to fill in a survey that said, hey, what would you like me to share with the Premier? Another Landy Anderson in Oshawa says, Dear Premier, I write to express my deep disappointment and growing outrage over the recent government's involvement in the Greenbelt housing scandal. The revelations surrounding this issue have shaken our trust in your administration and raised grave concerns about the integrity and transparency of your government's operations. It is disheartening to see a government that was elected to serve the best interests of Ontarians now mired in what appears to be nefarious and corrupt behaviour. The very essence of democracy and responsible governance relies on elected officials working diligently and transparently to uphold the welfare of their constituents. However, recent events surrounding the Greenbelt housing scandal suggest a troubling departure from these principles. He has more to say, but goes on to, in conclusion, I call upon you to address these allegations. The people of Ontario deserve nothing less. Only by rectifying this issue and recommitting to the principles of open and honest governance can we begin to rebuild the trust that has been eroded. These are just folks who have an understanding of what is unfolding. My colleague earlier had talked about this. How did you say it? It was like a constant victim.
Perpetual victims.
Perpetual victims, which was an interesting thought. But it's interesting that every challenge that we raise, everything that we say, hey, here's a problem, that we hear with, well, that's not our fault, or we inherited this, or let me tell you about that time Bob Ray, or whatever. And that's history. It's sure, it has a way of coming back to haunt all of us. Like the RCMP investigation may shortly for them. However, all that to say, we in this House have a responsibility to the people that we serve. And this government needs to take that responsibility and not constantly be shifting the blame, but actually look in the mirror and recognize where they could do better. We have had some conversation in this room about the fact that the Fall Economic Statement was used to launch the province's new infrastructure bank, and I'm interested in this. A lot of people are. There are questions we've heard from the CBC article that I'll read a quote from Brian Lewis, a former chief economist for the province. He says, Ontario's challenges with getting infrastructure built have always been about completing projects on schedule, never with financing them. And he says, quote, the current financing system seems to be working pretty well in Ontario, which leads us to the question of what's the problem this infrastructure bank is going to actually solve, end quote. Apparently, when the Minister of Finance, is that right? Yes, Minister of Finance was asked if establishing the bank opens the door to big investors profiting off public infrastructure projects, he said, quote, "I don't think profiting is the right way to think about it." He replied, "Think about it in terms of revenue streams." End quote. And I just find the wordplay and the wording dance always interesting in this space. But I'm putting the question at this point. I would be interested in how it will operate. So there are questions like it's a big deal, right? This is a big deal. The government has talked about it in positive terms. As the infrastructure critic, I am eager to better understand, because as your critic, or as this government's critic, I have raised a number of challenges in this House on the infrastructure and transportation file, and it's about building. Building and accountability and contracts and P3s. The financing piece is a new approach, and I think we're all eager to better understand it. I'll leave that there, though, because there has been some good discussion today, and I'm hoping that information will be forthcoming. Speaker, the fall economic statement didn't mention the word affordability. The members on the government side have talked about what page this and what page that is on in the fall economic statement, the shiny book, about measures that they say will make life better. Okay, but I will say and remind the government that fall economic statement document really is what's in the window, right? This bill, Bill 146, is what is in the legislation. So there's a difference between what you guys put on display and say, look at what we're promising, and then look at what we're going to deliver in the actual piece of legislation. Right. So you can tell me what shiny page, shiny detail is on, but then I want the government to be able to back that up by pointing to it in legislation that shows us how this is actually going to happen. Speaker, I want to talk a bit about housing. This is a government under our CMP investigation. They've been fueling speculation. The Greenbelt grab has grabbed the attention of folks who don't even know what the Greenbelt is or where it is, but they know darn well that this government has mishandled this. And it comes down to, the government for a long time said that the need for housing was what was driving this. Well, they've backed that up pretty quick. Nobody was ever believing that it was about housing. But I want to talk about housing in terms of what people are saying out in the community of Oshawa. So Darlene wrote to me, "The population of individuals and families experiencing homelessness in Oshawa is growing. There is very little affordable housing stock in our community, and ODSP and OW shelter portions are inadequate. We need government to build and maintain affordable housing units now and not at the expense of the Greenbelt. Market solutions are clearly not working." Brian Arscott wrote to me, "Bring back rent control. Housing needs to be affordable for those in need." Aaron Monroe said, "My family and I just had our offer accepted on a home in central Oshawa after being outbid by investors who came in with all cash offers far over asking on 5 other homes. Wow. We realize how fortunate we are that our offer was accepted on this house, but we still had to overbid and forego an inspection on the house to ensure that our family would have a place to live and grow. This needs to end. There need to be restrictions on investors and how many properties they can own. Young families like mine cannot compete with all these cash offers and cannot invest in our economy if we are never given the chance." End quote.
Good point.
Lisa Craig wrote, "Mr. Premier, please stop catering to your rich friends and help the people who are most in need of it. Each passing day there are more and more homeless, and affordable housing is hard to come by, if at all." Claudette Kennedy writes, "Why can't the government use its surplus to do something concrete for the homeless, invest more into health care and education for the people? Premier, prove it." Dave Musgrave writes, "Focus on housing for the disadvantaged and not profit for the advantaged." These are what folks just took the time and wanted to share in their own words. That's their experience and understanding. And I know that the government members are hearing it too. I mean, I think some of them forget that we've talked about the phone use. But I do think that most of them wake up in the morning and are interested in doing the job and probably carry a bit of guilt and have a sense of responsibility. And this is what you must also be hearing from your constituents, a version of it. But this is a government that voted against real rent control. You know, their priorities are this fancy schmancy luxury spa. Are luxury spas still going to be a thing in 95 years? Like, are people, like, is that going to be the technology? And I don't know. But it's a massive commitment, and that's their priority. The Auditor General now is probing the Ontario Place Redevelopment. Good news for Ontarians, because, you know, information has not been easy to come by. I've been chasing it. But not good news for this government, again. I want to share this letter from Jeff Burbidge, and I won't read all of it because I'm running out of time and I have a truckload of emails from folks. Jeff Burbidge, though, is my office is very worried about Jeff and his family. Jeff has reached out to just about all of the agencies in our community. No one has been able to offer real assistance, as he said, and he said, I am becoming increasingly depressed as a result of all of these brick walls. Here's what he has said. I am writing this email in the hopes that someone can help my family of four find affordable, sustainable housing. My family of four have been living and paying taxes in Durham Region for over 15 years now, and we've never once had to worry about housing until a few years ago. In 2021, we were paying $1,500 per month for the top floor of a bungalow. When COVID hit and the real estate market skyrocketed, our landlord asked us to vacate the property so he could sell his house. We were unaware of our rights as tenants at the time, and we started looking for a new residence. At that time, the average rental price for a suitable dwelling was around $2,450 per month, which is around $1,000 more than we had ever paid. Out of desperation, we signed a lease for a property we could not afford, but we needed a place to live, so I did what I had to do. One thing I have not mentioned yet is both of our children, 18 and 13 now, both have special needs. My daughter has been in and out of sick kids for the majority of the last 5 years, and this cost has me quite a few good-paying jobs. Our current housing situation has resulted in her having another episode of cyclical vomiting syndrome and has required me to miss a significant amount of work recently. As everyone is aware, COVID and our housing situation has severely impacted both mine and my wife's credit scores, making it virtually impossible to find housing in these difficult times. We are both working, dedicated parents and citizens. They're currently residing in Motel 6 through one of our community agencies, Cornerstone. But as he said, this is not a permanent solution to our problem, and all caps, my family is homeless. This is beyond acceptable in our country. Please help us. And Speaker, this is what keeps my staff up at night, right? That we've been talking to Jeff. We can't find him housing. He's working with every agency, and as he said, our caseworker at Cornerstone made it very clear this morning that our stay at the Motel 6 Whitby is time sensitive. I don't know what else I can do. As I have mentioned, we have 2 special needs children, and I myself struggle with mental health issues. This is a dad with 2 kids who just wants to keep them housed in camp. And that's looming, right? Got a letter from his mother, from a worried grandmother, but I realized that was about Jeff's same family, same situation. Homelessness affects a community. Speaker, I met with a woman when we were home during our constituency weeks, and she's on OW, and she has the maximum benefit of $733, but her rent is $1,000. And she needs her phone and internet to access online services to check housing availability, to check out housing and jobs. She needs gas in her car. Both of those services have now been cut from OW. And our office hadn't realized that. Like, we didn't know that that was a thing because benefits change. And as most of the members who do casework know, we have to do our best to chase those changes. From the OW office, they have been communicating with folks that because the Employment Services Transformation, or EST, is happening, they have said your benefits will still be there, but they might be called something slightly different. Other benefits will no longer be available through Ontario Works, but similar benefits will be provided by the Employment Ontario agencies you're eventually referred to. This is a massive change for people already struggling to put one foot in front of the other. And to pull the benefits away and put them behind door number 1, door number 2, you have to get lucky and know where door number 3 is really going to hurt people in our communities, and that's at the foot of this government, right? That's a change that's coming, and it is a really heavy one that is, again, looming for folks. So, Speaker, that's my time, but I am happy to take questions, and I wish I had another 20.
It is time for questions. I recognize the member for Essex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to address the member from Oshawa. I know that Oshawa has received a fantastic automotive investment of $1.2 billion, made possible through the efforts of the Minister of Economic Development and also through the efforts of the Premier. So the future of Oshawa is bright, thanks to the work done by this government. But you know what that's going to mean? It means that we're going to have a huge demand in Oshawa for skilled tradespeople, hundreds, perhaps even thousands. And what we have set out here in the Building a Strong Ontario Together plan is a whole series of skilled trade programs designed to develop more people in the skilled trades to meet the demand that's going to happen in Ontario, such as in Oshawa. So my question to the member is this: how many hundreds or perhaps even thousands of skilled trade jobs does the member think is going to be created in Oshawa as a result of this government's historic efforts to bring automotive investments to the province of Ontario?
Back to the member for response.
Thank you. And in answer, hopefully a lot. And we have excellent post-secondary institutions in Oshawa. There are a lot of needs that the students have. We have talked about student debt being an inhibitor. There are lots of pieces that I hope the government also factors in as we are talking about the future of those young students when it comes to their education first, also the economy, but also they need places to live so that they can continue to work in the community. Because you are absolutely right, sir, the future of Oshawa is bright, but not unchallenged. And this is where I would like the government to take that responsibility and say, we are going to build affordable housing. We are going to prioritize the futures of those young people in all directions. Thank you.
For the questions, I recognize the member for London North Centre.
Thank you, Speaker. And I'd like to thank the member from Oshawa for her presentation today. I listened intently. There's very much a disconnect between what this government says and what it does. We heard for months that the Greenbelt grab was about housing, when evidence has borne out that it really had nothing to do with housing and really had more to do with enriching wealthy speculators. Now, I wanted to ask the member specifically, you mentioned the infrastructure bank, and, they've talked about how they're using this $3 billion to not make a profit, but to create new revenue tools. Interesting choice of words. But in particular about housing, if the government really cared about keeping people housed, such as the constituents you were discussing in your remarks, what could they do to ensure that those folks were able to have truly affordable housing?
Back to the member for response.
I feel like I need kind of a list of the initiatives that the NDP has put forward, different motions looking for support from this government when it comes to tenant protections, and I have written a letter to the new minister, but the former minister, the one who I don't remember having seen him. Wait, we're not allowed to say that. Anyway, the minister that is no longer a minister. Okay, so backing up. A number of us have been writing to the current minister about the experience of people trying to buy a new home and the unbelievable mess. And when I talked to the then Minister for Municipal Affairs and Housing, the current minister, this is not a partisan issue. We've all been on the same page about what is happening is not okay, and yet it hasn't been fixed. So there are a number of things in the weeds and big picture that we can work together on, but let's get them done. Thank you.
For the questions, I recognize the member from Brampton West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite for her remarks on this very, very important bill, Madam Speaker. The opposition will often stand in this House and give long remarks, long speeches on affordability. But when it comes to making life affordable for the people of this province, what they do, colleagues, they will vote against those measures, Madam Speaker. Every single time the government has brought the measures to make life affordable, opposition will vote against those measures, Madam Speaker. Can the member opposite tell this House, will they do the right thing and support this bill that will make life affordable for the people of this province?
Back to the member for response.
I only had 20 minutes today, but the member is, accusing us of giving long speeches. I wish I had had more time to give you all that I had here on healthcare, on education, on the challenges faced by people. But when you voted against rent control, and when we see record lineups at food banks, it's kind of fascinating to hear your version of affordability. And in terms of what we voted for or not, it was my private member's bill that I was really proud to table before the government to take the tolls off of the 412 and 418. And I see the former Minister of Transportation. She will know that I was an enthusiastic supporter of that initiative, and I am glad, as are the people across Durham region, that was done. But that is one tiny thing, and that only affects those who drive those roads. We need so many more affordability measures for people across the province. Come up with something substantial and many and varied, and we'd be glad to support that.
Further questions? I recognize the member from London West.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and thank you to my colleague, the member for Oshawa, for her remarks. I suspect that she does a lot of research to prepare for her speeches, and I suspect that she reviewed the report from the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives that looked at Ontario's program spending over the last 5 years compared to today, and adjusted the amounts for inflation and population growth. And that analysis showed that real per capita spending on post-secondary education has declined by 11% since 2018. Programs for children and social services have gone down 12% since 2018, and 11% decline in education.
Question?
That's not because those needs have decreased. It's because the government is deliberately underspending. What does the member think that the government should be doing in those sectors?
Back to the member.
Thank you for asking, and I will say that what I've heard from members in my community are really tangible, and they're very specific. And I'll read a few of them because I didn't have a chance to delve into education. Here is Heidi, who says, we want to know that our schools are safe places for everyone to learn. We want to know that if we need to see a doctor, go to the hospital, we can get high-quality care. Another, Brian, says, our teachers are struggling. They have too much on their hands, increasingly less support. This hurts them and ultimately our students and our children. Someone else has said, I currently work for the Government of Ontario and cannot find space in licensed daycare centres to care for my daughter before and after school. I'm 71st on the list at my daughter's school for before and after school care. I find it incredibly difficult to work the mandated 3 days a week without supportive childcare. The government can spin it that they're spending record amounts on X, Y, and Z, but when inflation is going up and the cost of everything is going up, it is not enough. It may be more than yesterday, but it's not nearly enough to get us through today.
Further questions? I recognize the member for Windsor-Tecumseh.
Thank you, Speaker. I want to thank the member from Oshawa for her remarks. And just actually about a year ago, I was in Ontario Tech University. It was what an institution. That's certainly one to be proud of. It was such a tremendous opportunity to go visit your neck of the woods. One of the things that I learned on that trip was access to capital was a very serious issue raised by many people in manufacturing, and I think we're finding that across the board, that access to capital has been limited. So the Infrastructure Bank, I know you touched upon it in your comments, it's seeking to find those kinds of investors that are otherwise investing elsewhere. I think of Canada Pension Plan that invested in Neiman Marcus and lost $6 million on it. So I was hoping you can elaborate on your thoughts on the Ontario Infrastructure Bank and your concerns with it.
Back to the member.
Thank you. And as I had raised the same questions that the government is hearing about what is the need for this actually about, because it hasn't been a challenge for financing in the province. The province has been able to get the money to build. The problem seems to be that the government isn't building or delivering on schedule. And I'm happy to have a sit down and talk about the nonsense with a lot of the P3 contracts and some of the challenges that the province enters into, like knowingly, time after time, that is about the cost and the schedules and the inability, I'll use the term to police, but to have transparency in that process. So the infrastructure bank, at this point I'd say it's kind of a curiosity, because I'm interested to hear what the members have said during debate, but that's more information than we've had, right? This is the launch. This is the time for us to talk about it.